Hey guys, I am down on the allotment today for one chore, and that is to put up support netting. Let's go. For anyone that doesn't know, my name is Peggy and I am coming into my third year of growing a cut flower garden here on my allotment in Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan, which is just south of Tokyo in USDA Zone 9B. Thanks for checking out my channel. Okay, so I am going to be putting support netting on some of my flowers, but not all of them. Now, a lot of people don't do this and I completely understand why, because it is a massive pain in the arse. If you do not have high winds, if you have a sheltered garden, I don't think you really need to do this, and I know a lot of people don't bother. For me, the last 2 weeks we have had crazy Scottish-like winds, which is rare for here. But we do also have typhoon season later on, and we have very heavy rains in rainy season, aptly named. So I like to put certain things with netting so that they can have a little bit of support during those times. And I usually put it on when I seed, just for ease, but I hadn't done that this time because I had put things under low tunnels and I'd put frost cloth on some stuff. So this stuff hasn't been netted yet, and now I need to go in and do it before it starts getting too tall. It's hot and my forehead is like a giant solar panel. Hat time. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is my stalk, which I had under a low tunnel, so I couldn't put the netting on this when I transplanted it, but that would have been the best time to put it on. But I'm going to go in today and put it on because it really needs it. You can see the stalk that is starting to get tall is also starting to get bendy and twisty. And that is not what I want. I want nice long stems. These are the two tallest and these are the worst. A lot of the ones down at the front are still short and doing okay. But again, this guy, you can see I've tried to individually stake him, but the wind has actually knocked the stake down. But yeah, these guys need some help because they're all getting too bendy. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and get these low tunnel hoops out the way because they're just annoying. Okay, so you can see in this row that I have left in all of these supports that I put in last year, and that's because I knew I was going to have to put netting back on here, so I just leave these guys in the ground. Here I have my stalk, but after that comes my Achillea, which doesn't necessarily need netting to help it. It gets quite big and bushy and tends to kind of hold itself together, but it wouldn't be a bad thing to put it on. But I also have my lupin here. And they do get big and strong, and because we have the typhoon season and the rainy season, I do want to be able to help them. Another great thing about these guys is I think when rainy season proper hits, I might try and put a bit of a frost cloth or something over the top of these guys just to try and stop the full impact of the rain hitting them, and kind of, you know, soften the blow a little bit and see if that helps. When I planted these, I purposely only planted up to that second line. Here is exactly where my stalk and my lupin will finish. I did that because behind them I have my, what do I have behind them? I've completely forgotten what they're called. Rudbeckia. They're called Rudbeckia. Behind them I have my Rudbeckia. Now Rudbeckia are one of the shortest things that I grow in the garden. They do not get very tall. Beautiful flowers, but not massive long stems. So they are not going to need netted. Right now I have my ranunculus behind them, but when the ranunculus are done, I will be putting in my lisianthus. Now this is the first time I've ever grown lisianthus. I have managed to get the seeds to germinate, but they're still like this big. So I don't know when they're going to go in the ground, and I don't know how tall they're going to get, but I don't think those ones need netted. If you have grown lisianthus before, please let me know what your experience with them was and tell me, should I be putting netting on those? But for now, in this row, I think it's only going to be this front section that I'm going to put netting on, which is why I only planted between these, because it makes it really easy. So let's get netting on. Now when I do this, I use this, which is like cucumber netting, with the 10 centimeter squares in it. I find that that works fine and it's really easy to put on, and then I just attach it with cable ties, which I reuse every year, which is why these guys are all twisty. So I just hook it onto my pole, hold it in place with one of these. Now I am going to go ahead and put on at least 2 layers of netting. I'm going to put on one really lower than I usually would to make sure that these little guys at the front are getting some support now, and then I'll just double the netting back and put it over a second time. If I have room to put on a third one, I'm going to go ahead and do that as well, but it really depends on how long these bits of netting are, because these are the ones I used last year as well, so they're all cut to slightly different sizes. Yeah, note to future self, be a bit more organised, eh? Okay, so we've got our first layer here, second layer here, third layer here. So that is going to give them lots of support when they grow. Now remember, if you're doing this with stock like I just did, that you've already planted out, you have to be really, really careful if you have to try and move it to get it to fit through the right square, because stock are one and done and they break really easily. If you break this head off, you're not getting a flower. That's it, rip it up, nothing's going to come of it, it's just going to take up space in your garden. So you do want to be very, very careful when you're trying to manipulate these into the right spots. So in this next row I have chrysanthemum, which are still really, really small, and these ones will bloom in October, November and December. I have gladiola, I have poppy, I have scabious and echinacea, I have some eryngium, sea holly, sweet william and allium, and none of those need any kind of support. They either don't grow tall enough to need it, or they are strong enough to hold themselves up. So moving on. In this row I have my sweet pea, which are growing up on their frames, freesia, anemone and daffodil, which don't need anything. I have already planted in some geum where the daffodil are. My anemone are going to be globe thistle, so they will not need netted either. After that I have planted in some zinnia, which I'm waiting for to come up, and then I will have cosmos and strawflower here. So eventually I will be putting netting on most of this row for the zinnia, the cosmos and the strawflower, but for now I'm just going to leave it as it is. And that brings us to my final row, which I currently have snapdragon and tulip. Now again, you can see my snapdragon I had under low tunnels and with some frost cloth on them, but I do not need that now, so I am going to take these out and again put netting on for my snapdragon, because like the stock, these guys have been beaten up by the crazy wind that we've had recently, even though my neighbour does actually have a wind barrier here, which I have sneakily been able to take advantage of as well. But they still haven't done very well, especially the ones that are taller are looking not happy at all. And these guys are sun seekers, so when they get knocked over by the wind, they then try to correct themselves to get the sun, and you end up with the wonky stems that I now have. So these little guys down the front are all doing okay and coming up nice and straight, but I've got some taller guys at the back. And you can see that these guys are all starting to get wonky. So he has been knocked over by the sun, by the wind, and gone that way, and then tried to self-correct and gone upwards. So now I end up with, when I cut it, a stem that comes up straight and then goes off almost at a right angle. So I will put the netting on and hope that this guy can actually correct himself. This guy looked a lot worse this morning, so he's obviously started to correct himself already. But again, you can see this one has been knocked down here by the wind, and then has tried to correct to find the sun and has ended up at a right angle. So I'm going to go ahead and put netting over this little part of the garden. But I'm not going to net all the way up. I'm going to stop it where my snapdragon stopped. Now currently I have in tulip there. I've also planted in some of my bergamot, and I have some salvia that's coming up from last year and some crimson clover. Now when my snapdragon are done in here, I plan on putting in a couple of different types of African marigold, and it's the first time I've grown them, but they do grow tall and so will need netted as well, so I can just leave that on. Where my tulip are is where I have planted my dahlia. Now for the last 2 years I have been netting my dahlia because they definitely need support, but what I've found is that either the netting I'm using is too small if I got a bigger one, but because my rows are quite narrow, I don't know if that would work. But I find that the dahlia actually end up getting tangled up in the netting when they try to put their branches, side branches out. They're getting stuck in the netting, and it's actually causing them to grow at funny angles and get really mixed up. And when I want to clear my dahlia at the end of the year, it's an absolute nightmare to pull all of the branches out through all of the different layers of netting. but mostly I feel like they're actually being held back by the netting. It's distorting them and causing them to not grow as straight as I would like. So instead of netting my dahlia this year, I'm going to try just corralling them. Once they get big enough to require any kind of support, I will just be lacing around these poles that I have already in, lacing twine around those and then going diagonally through them just to give them a little bit of extra support. And the idea is that they're grown close together because it's a cutting garden, and so they should actually kind of self-support or support each other. Now, if that doesn't work, I have got half a bed here, so that's only 2 meters, where I have about, I'm gonna say 12. What do we think? Do we think I put in 12 dahlia? So it's not a huge job for me to go in and individually stake those with canes. And as you can see, I do have canes lying here ready to go if that's what needs done. If you are growing them on a larger scale, you might want to net them, but I think corralling is going to be the better way to deal with that. But we'll find out at the end of the season if that's actually enough. Like I say, I have typhoon season and rainy season here, which I think is something not a lot of people are having to deal with. So I do need to make sure that my plants have the support in place. But for now, I am going to, again, pull out these low tunnel hoops and get some netting on these very needy snapdragon. See that? It's a perfect fit. It's almost like I planned and measured it. Okay, so that is 2 layers of netting on now. As these get taller, I might actually need to add a 3rd layer on, but let's wait and see how they do. Unlike stock, these guys are cut and come again. So if you happen to knock off a head while you're trying to thread them through, don't worry about it. It just acts as a pinch, and it will actually cause your snapdragon to put out more side branches and give you a bushier plant. I am not doing that this year. I have decided not to pinch my snapdragon as a bit of an experiment, and you can see why in the experimental video that I did about pinching and propagating my snapdragon, and I'll put a link to that below. But that is looking good for now, and it's a lot less netting that I had on the garden last year, where I thought that everything needed support, and I found that it was just really annoying. It tangled up the plants. It was a real annoying thing to take off at the end of the season when I had all the dead plants sticking up through it. But it is essential in my climate and my, not even my climate, my crazy weather systems that come through here, to give these guys support, or I end up with a flattened garden, which I have had in the past. Cue pictures of my flattened garden. Oh, I just had a ladybird land on my head. The first of the season, it must be spring. Okay, so that is all from me for this week. Do let me know if you have had better success with something other than netting. Please let me know. If you live in a crazy climate like mine, where you're battling with the same typhoon and rainy season and things, and you know how I can do things easier than netting, please let me know in the comments. I appreciate all help with this. If you want to follow along and see how my garden does, please remember to hit the subscribe button below. If you want to look back and see what I do with all the flowers that I cut from my garden, you can check out my Instagram, which is From the Witch's Garden, and there's a link to that below. I'll also put a link to my snapdragon videos and anything else that I've mentioned in this video below as well, so do check out what I say in my little blurb thing down there. But that is all from me this week. Good luck with your growing. If you are getting into your spring season, there's another ladybird. If you're getting into your spring season, good luck with your seed starting, and do let me know how your gardens are going as well. I will see you guys next week. Bye.